I think everybody, regardless of whether you're in the United States or not, knows that it was recently an election year and a tense one at that. Now, here's my promise to you: I'm not planning on getting political whatsoever. Hopefully, people will continue to wonder, where does Christopher sit on things? Because, quite frankly, I will tell you, if you want to know, you'd need to have a private conversation with me, because I will tell you right now, it's a position you will not expect. So it's always entertaining to me when I hear people go, "You must be this or you must be that." And I'm like, actually, you're wrong on all fronts. So anyway, if you're curious, you can message me, and that's a separate conversation. But what I wanted to talk about actually does have to do with this whole intersection of what's going on, because in the fallout of the election and even leading up to the election, I was watching uh, the rise of AI's use in creating media, accelerating media, doing all this stuff, and the effect that it's had on people. And to me, it's been really, really unfortunate watching just how we've behaved as human beings through this whole thing. And I get it. I understand the passion that people have. I understand the pain people have experienced, which fuels their feelings and emotions about what's going on. And so many of the things are really, really good that people have. I get it. I have friends on all ends of the spectrum, literally all, not just Republican, Democrat, like literally everything in between, and dimensions that probably aren't even on that spectrum. And as I get to know people on a human level, what I find is there's always something deep and meaningful underneath where all this stuff comes from. And to me, that's what's been really tragic, watching how things have played out leading up to it and in the kind of wake of the decision of the election. And it's continuing to happen. I'm watching AI being used to create completely fabricated stuff that's just going viral. And then it's also fueling people up, and it's dividing left and right. And this last week, I decided to give it a little time. I have a pretty big LinkedIn audience if we're not connected on LinkedIn. And I didn't want to get into it because I recognize, growing up in a funeral home, the bottom line is I've seen the whole spectrum of human emotions. And so often we are so bad at dealing with our emotions, they end up coming out in all different sorts of ways. And so whether you were celebrating or grieving, the challenge we have with dealing with our emotions leads us to make really not great decisions. And sometimes we just need a little bit of time. So I took some time before saying anything about it. But then late last week, I came into it, or actually this past weekend and early this week, I came into it and just said, listen, like, I get it. If you're grieving, you need to grieve. If you're celebrating, it's okay to celebrate. But let's not let kindness be lost in all of this. And let's not forget our shared humanity that we have. And I had a little league coach that I'm not much of a sports guy, if you get to know me, but I know enough about them that I can fool most people. But when I talk to people, I remember my little league coach always said, after every game, whether we win, whether we lose, whether we feel they cheated, whether we feel it was a fair game, it doesn't matter. We go out and we walk across the field and we go shake hands with the other team. And sometimes you would walk over there and they were scowling at you because you just beat the pants off of them. And then other times they were so busy celebrating and kind of like mocking how bad you did. It was like awkward walking up and being like, hey, hi, hi. And it was a terrible experience. But I remember our coach was like, but this is what matters, because if all of us just walk to the other person's dugout, eventually we can meet in the middle. And that doesn't mean that everything is always meeting in the middle in terms of like, we all have to agree somewhere in between, but meeting in the middle in terms of like remembering we're all people and we all have lives that we're leading. We're all trying to do our best and we're all trying to navigate this stuff, and we're all carrying invisible burdens. And if we can just keep that at the center of things, it won't fix everything, but it'll help us through some of these tough moments. And I remember that. And so I wrote about it. And yeah, it really set some people off. And not just, some people might hear this and go, oh, that's because you're a, whatever. And like I said, don't think you know my political affiliations, because you don't. Um, and so I got stuff from all ends of the political spectrum. I had the pro-Trumpers telling me that, I was a liberal, this and that, and said some horrible things. And then I had the liberals, the Harris, the Trump haters, who were like, you're clearly just a Trump supporter, and I'm not going to shake hands with people who, da da da. And I just got lit up on all sides. And let me say that, boy, I have had to work on self-control a lot over the years, because my natural tendency is not to be gracious and to be gentle and to be kind and understanding and patient. I'm quick with my tongue. If you've followed me for long, I have a lot to say on things, and I come up with stuff pretty quick, which can be a real good thing. It can also be very dangerous. But needless to say, I took the time to get to know. I reached out to every single person, regardless of how horrific their message was to me. And I just said, hey, listen, I clearly can tell that this is a very emotionally charged situation for you. And I'm sorry for whatever it is that is contributing to that. And I promise you, my goal in sharing that was not to offend or upset or cause further division, but truly just to say, let's take the time to get to know one each other. And let's not assign the worst attributes of certain people to everybody simply because there's a single point of connection between those people, because people are far more dynamic and fascinating than any one attribute that they carry with them. And some people blew me off. A handful sent not very nice responses back, but most actually took me up on it. I think they were kind of surprised, like, whoa, here I sent you this really nasty message and you responded kindly and actually wanted to meet me. And so this last week, I've spent countless hours just sitting down with people who initially spewed vitriol and hatred at me for simply saying, let's just treat each other kindly, please. Like, regardless of our differences, let's just be kind. Let's not let hatred be what drives us. And the conversations didn't always start super smooth. There's a little, it reminded me back of Little League, where it's like, sometimes I was like walking into this going, man, I can just see in your eyes, you hate me right now. And that's okay. Like, I'm not, my goal in this is not to win you to my side or convince you of anything, but I just want to sit down and talk. And let me tell you what, I had some of the best conversations I have had in a long time with people who had just visible hatred for me in the beginning of this. And I had people crying on calls, sharing what they were going through. We shared very emotional conversations. We were there for each other, and it was a true experience of just empathy and understanding for one another. And every single one of the conversations that I had ended with mutual respect and kindness and understanding towards each other. And guess what? We didn't walk out of those calls going, well, gee, I guess now we agree on everything. We didn't. There was still unique differences. And we even talked through some of those differences, because they said, well, obviously you think this. And I said, well, no, actually I don't. But what do you want to know? Like, let's talk about it. What do you think? Why do you think what you think? Let me understand what you're going through. And some of the stories they shared, I go, you know what? If that had been my experience, I would probably feel very similar to you. And I can relate to that. And I looked for those common points of mutual agreement. Now, I don't tell you this story to pat myself on the back and tire pump. I tell you this story because I know a lot of people who, and by the way, I also did get lots of messages from people who were very kind. So I don't want to paint this out and exacerbate, this idea that everybody's just pissed off and wants to beat everybody up. I mean, there's lots of that, but that's not the case everywhere. And I don't tell this story to tire pump or go, look how great I was. I tell this story to encourage people right now because I understand it's scary. And I'm doing a thing tomorrow or this week on authentic leadership and how important it is to be authentic. And being authentic is terrifying right now because there are a lot of people who are afraid that if they're real, they're going to get ripped to shreds. And if they just share what's really going on, they will be torn to shreds. And I'm not saying just go out there and, let it all hang out. That's foolish. But I want to encourage people to lean into some of that discomfort, lean into those conversations with people who might even treat you like crap out of the gate, who might be really nasty to you on the surface, and don't respond the same way they treated you, but instead be understanding and push through it. Because I can say, and I share this story more as an encouragement to go, one, don't hide your authenticity. You know what? If you supported Trump, you supported Trump. If you voted for him because you just didn't know what else to do and you felt like it was the best, then let that be your authentic. Like, if you hate the guy and you can't stand the fact he's in office, it's okay. You don't need to pretend that that's not the case, but there are ways to do it with kindness and understanding with people. And so I want to encourage people to find ways to be authentic, because there's nothing worse than pretending you have to. I was reading some things on social media of like people feeling like they have to pretend they didn't vote for Trump even though they did. And I'm like, well, that's a terrible place to be in. And I know people who are pretending like they are kind of supportive of him even though they can't stand the guy because they feel like, well, if I say anything, that's not a great place to be in. And so I want to encourage people to be authentic, but also to let you know that if you can push through that really, really difficult, uncomfortable, tense situation, there is light on the other side. Okay. Like I said, are there exceptions that I experienced this week? Yes. I still am assuming positive intent and going, you know what? Maybe just where you are right now, you still need to grieve or you still need to celebrate. And whatever it is I triggered in you, you're just not ready to cross that bridge. And that's okay. And I'm not mad about that. But I would say the overwhelming majority of people either very quickly change their tune or by the end change their tune. And by change the tune, I don't mean, and we now see eye to eye on everything. That wasn't the case at all. But we were able to change the tune to, I see you as a decent, kind, a wonderful human being who is really trying to do your very best. And maybe we don't agree on everything, but we can shake hands and we can say, you know what, you're not a, here's all these labels that I've heard associated with this. And again, I'm not just saying, oh, this is Trump support. I've seen the same thing. I have, like I said, I have friends all over the place who have been labeled all sorts of things because of one attribute. And I know how awful that is. And for those of you who know me, you know I'm coming at this from a biblical worldview, but I don't need to quote the Sermon on the Mount or James 3 or Ephesians 2, to try and convince you of this. We all know what that experience is like, to be labeled with something that is not accurate or incomplete, or to be treated poorly simply because of assumptions people have made about us. We know that feeling and how horrible it is. And everybody shares that. And there's this terrible tendency to, when power dynamics shift and you have the opportunity to be the one to do that to someone else, to take it. And I would just encourage you not to, but to lay down your swords. And when somebody takes that opportunity on you, do a little jujitsu. Catch them off guard by being kind. Catch them off guard by being understanding. Catch them off guard by inviting them into a conversation and empathizing with what they're dealing with and asking questions instead of just arguing, because it works. And that really was what I wanted to open with, was just this encouragement to do this, because I know it's scary. I know it's uncomfortable. I know it's awful because you're going to get punched and that doesn't feel good. But if you can push through it, there is light on the other side. And yeah, there might be times, and there are certain people in my life where I've had to go, you know what, you just keep punching. I'm not going to come back anymore. And that's okay. I'm not suggesting, like, that was some of the other things. What you're saying, go back to abusers. And I'm like, that's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is, don't assume somebody's an abuser or a horrible person until you've actually gotten to know them and have your own personal experience with that person. And I just want to encourage people to do more of that, because as we come out of the wake of the 2024 election, There is so much happening with technology and uncertainty in the markets. And I mean, there is so much. And if there's anything that can help, well, I've got another commentary on what's really going to get to the root of helping through that. But one thing that universally, regardless of where you sit worldview, that can help with this is actually building bridges instead of walls. And so I want to encourage us to start a revolution of kindness and understanding and patience and self control to push back against this just overwhelming tidal wave of vitriol and hatred and just negative assumptions, because it's not real, but it feels real, and I understand why. And you know what, to the folks who go, well, I'm not participating in that, if you're just being quiet and just letting it happen, you are participating in it. You are an active participant in it through your silence. And by sitting quietly and letting it happen and not saying, hey, like, let's not talk so negatively. Let's maybe change the subject. Let's maybe think positively. Let's assume positive intent. I'm sure that's not what they intended. If you're not stepping into that, you are contributing to the problem, because that silence is actually validating the kind of behavior. And I've been the one who's been there and gone, well, I didn't contribute to it. I kind of just steered clear of it. But what that actually did was tell the person that, yeah, what you're doing is fine, because that's already where their head is. And when you stay quiet, people fill it with validation. So I just want to encourage people to be different, to push against this, and not to try and, convince you, well, because that's what, the Bible says you're supposed to do. But that's what you would want done to you, because you've been there. And I just wanted to share the story of what I went through this week as an encouragement to go, yeah, it sucked. It was uncomfortable. There was a lot of times I wanted to just completely lash out. I'm not going to sit here and go, no, at no point did I ever. I just was calm and collected. Like, no, yeah, my blood started boiling. My neck started turning red. I wanted to say some really, really intense things. And boy, I'm good at that if I need to. And I don't want to use that. And by pushing through it, I actually built some friendships and some relationships with people who clearly would have otherwise hated me. And like I said, we still don't agree, but we now would call each other friends. And so I hope that can be an encouragement to those of you who listen to this week. All right, enough with that. Hopefully I've made my case. And if you have questions, or you're like, how, or like, what did you do? Or what was some of the things? Go ahead and ask. And you know what? If I piss you off and you send me a really nasty message and I send you a really nasty message back, well, then call me on the carpet and be like, you liar, you hypocrite. Because I really do try and be understanding and kind. And I'm far from perfect at it. You can ask my wife. I am far from perfect at it.